Do you know that genetic testing could ruin one's chances to qualify for insurance coverage? So one might ask, really? And what does this have to do with healthcare delivery? So let's look at the big picture. First things first, let's look at what genes and genetic testing are really all about. So genes are those biochemical markers which serve as the building blocks that are responsible for life forms. Genes are the hereditary information or material to code the development of any species. And in our case, as humans, that's what makes you you and me me. Genetic tests, these are medical tests that identify changes or abnormalities in these building blocks that we just spoke about. And these abnormalities may be in the chromosomes, in the genes, or in their protein content. So there are really some key points to consider when looking at genetic testing. The results of a genetic test can confirm or rule out a suspected condition or help to determine a person's chances of developing or passing on a genetic disorder. There are more than 1,000 genetic tests currently in use and more are being developed. Testing includes three test groups: predictive testing, prenatal testing, or newborn tests screens. So let's look at these three main tracks of genetic testing in a little bit more detail. The predictive tests, these are molecular genetic tests that study single genes or short lengths of DNA to identify variations or mutations that can lead to a genetic disorder, such as breast cancer or Alzheimer's disease. Your prenatal testing, these are chromosomal genetic tests that look at extra copies of a chromosome that may cause a genetic condition in the newborn, such as trisomy 18 or 21, and these are genetic malformations. Cystic fibrosis also is grouped under this. Biochemical genetic tests, our third group, can also include newborn screening, which would study the amount of activity level of genetic protein materials. So, back to the big question. Does genetic test affect life insurance or long-term insurance coverage? Genetic testing and life insurance intersect at the realization of mortality and morbidity risk factors. Controversy surrounding genetic testing is whether or not life insurance companies can use the insurance to your disadvantage. The Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, passed in 2008, is to prohibit health insurance carriers from denying coverage based on gene mutations, but it does not apply to insurance providers or their carriers. They may also, in some states and in some cases, these carriers may choose to refuse covering certain genetic tests that the consumer may want to have. So when considering your application for life insurance or long-term insurance, insurers and their underwriters will want to delve into your family history or your past medical history as they consider your insurance application. They're looking for any history of genetic testing that puts you at risk for a predictive disease. This information is often used to deny or to discriminate, sometimes with an outright denial of coverage, or the price of the policy is so hiked it becomes too expensive to acquire. These insurance companies, unregulated by the Genetic Information Non-Discriminatory Act, can use available test results to deny and exclude persons requesting life insurance, like we just discussed. Consumers seeking to adopt protective responses to this issue, in some cases, are advised to first acquire the desired insurance coverage before doing the genetic testing. In this way, they can circumvent these undesirable and unfavorable insurance practices. Bringing the issue closer to home and aligning it more closely with care delivery, these insurers can deny applications for long-term care coverage for persons that they deem at risk. So this can become a real issue. As Americans are living longer and morbidity rates are not well controlled, consumers become more intelligent about acquiring long-term care benefits and protection through insurance. Here is where a large part of the problem exists for many healthcare consumers. If you test positive for the BRCA genes, for breast cancer, or the EFDA genes for Alzheimer's and that hereditary risks, these results are discoverable and can be used against you. You may be refused coverage, and that would refuse coverage that would provide protection and security as you plan ahead for possible healthcare needs. In complete irony, in some cases, these insurance carriers may deny covering particular genetic tests that are indicated. So genetic testing information has to be managed carefully and responsibly, that consumers are not scared off by the heavy-handed and discriminatory practices of insurance carriers. This may compound the problem, as consumers may feel threatened and scared off from being tested. Consumers could miss a critical intervention that would have been mandated through routine testing and care procedures. With this, consumers may want to consider paying out of pocket to avoid alerting the insurance carriers when some genetic tests are sought. Clinical care providers are not exempt from this issue. The doctorate of nursing practice clinician can play a very significant role here in this healthcare process. The DNP has the responsibility to educate as a care provider so that the patients, the consumers served, and those who may be affected by genetic testing are aware of how their medical test results can be used in the marketplace. Consumers need to be advised as to the necessary applicability of genetic testing. So, what does one discriminatory marketplace have to do with us as DNPs? Actually, quite a bit. The DNP is equipped to provide effective and responsible counseling, or to refer consumers out for counseling as part of the care delivery. This will allow the consumer to make an informed or an intelligent testing decision that will enhance or protect their health. This may not void the trail, though, that can be created by available tests and evidence produced by genetic testing. As our consumers obtain and decide how best to use the information, the service by the DNP can definitely be a huge step in enhancing and improving health literacy, which is actually one of my passions in healthcare delivery. Additionally, the DNP can function in another significant care delivery role, and that is of advocate for this patient population. The DNP can bring collaborative pressure to bear on the insurance market to encourage these insurers and underwriters underwriting policies that will serve the healthcare needs of their consumers. As I conclude this talk, I encourage you to begin to look around at your own health, your family's health, and the healthcare needs of the people that we serve. Look if it relates to or coincides with genetic testing. I challenge you in your prospective roles as DNP graduates and care providers to expand this look into your own practice. Consider your possible role as an advocate or a counselor for the next time your consumer sits in front of you and genetic testing is required. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching and listening.